Welcome to Visions, a series of visits to almost everywhere, and part 2 of On the Set, Unsolved Mysteries, the life and death of Dr. Frank Olson. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Herb Malsman. Without further ado, let's head back to Baltimore, Maryland, and the set. Here we go.
You don't have to answer him directly either, but you can sort of put him out on the limb for those kinds of things. And that's what the Olson.
You're listening to Visions, a series of visits to almost everywhere. I'm your host, Herb Malsman. We're in Baltimore, Maryland. We're at the Hotel Belvedere, which is now a condominium. It is supposed to be the Statler Hotel in New York City. It is the first segment of Unsolved Mysteries, and we'll get the year date in a little while. Our tape date is August 6, 1994. We're on location in Suite 1005 of the Belvedere. We're going to be spending Saturday and Sunday here. Tomorrow night, again, this is Saturday, tomorrow night is the dead body seen on the street. The gentleman, Frank Olson, was a biochemist, highly respected during the Cold War back in 1953, who leapt, jumped, was pushed, or fell mysteriously from a hotel window on the 13th floor at the Statler Hotel in New York City.
I don't know how long this is going to go on. I haven't been able to perform my job.
We'll have to get Jamie's.
What's this going to do?
Frank giving some more direction.
He was hearing your voice telling him to throw his money and his idea away. You know, it's the CIA guys who put him in this position. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's not only just the friend aspect, it's you've got your best scientist a day away from leaping out of a window. You got security risk, those kinds of issues absolutely are there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't be able to expound on that.
No, but that's the
internally, right? Okay, great.
Let's talk about glasses.
The rehearsal is over. One of the voices you just heard in the rehearsal, Bob Wise, is the director. Bob, for my audience, set the scene that we were privy to just now.
In the story, there's a scene where Frank Olson, who's the man who ended up leaping out of the window, was seeing a doctor in New York City. He was not a psychiatrist, but he was somebody who was well versed with LSD back in the 50s. He was a doctor, an allergist by trade, but he knew enough about LSD that his Frank Olson's bosses from the CIA brought him to see this guy named Harold Abramson. The scene we're portraying here is one of those visits. There was about 5 visits altogether. This is one of those visits where Frank Olson was obviously very agitated, had reached an almost psychotic or paranoid state, probably due to the LSD trip he had taken 5 or 6 days before.
I had mentioned that you really weren't working from a script. I'm sure you do work from a script, but this is kind of like sort of freewheeling, freelance. Is this actual dialogue? I guess it can't be, but you really have to create the dialogue a little bit. How finely scripted is this piece?
Most of our segments are not scripted at all. We have outlines where we know which each scene is supposed to illustrate or demonstrate, and then we have the actors and the director, myself, figure out what the language wants to be. We know what we're trying to get across, the point we're trying to get across, and sometimes, like in this case, I know specific things that were stated because I have documents that refer to it, but in general we don't script it. We allow the actors to kind of improv.
Are you happy with what you're getting so far?
Well, so far we just started, but I know the actors we worked yesterday and the day before, and they're great actors, and I'm sure it'll come out great. Mm-hmm. But it takes time to figure out, to hone the performances and the dialogue and the energy level.
Right.
But we're just starting, but so far so good.
Is it too early to ask how this story turns out?
It's way too early to tell. Mm-hmm. This will probably be a case that will go on for years. It involves government, it involves national security secrets, it involves the CIA, and generally I suspect in cases like this it takes a long time, if ever, to get a resolution.
Right. Now, you weren't happy with the set. What happened here? You took out the couch. What occurred there? Was you were not happy with the set? Why the changes now?
Well, actually, the set looks great. If you had seen it before, you'd be surprised at how much we've changed. No, we were just making really minor adjustments to make it a little easier for the cameraman to get angles and for the actors to find positions that felt comfortable. But no, it's been great. The couch, it really was a couch that was in this apartment before we moved in, and we're just getting it out of the way because it was in the way.
Right. Okay, how long are you with the series now? A little bit of your background.
I've been with the series since the very beginning. I was the initial cameraman on the pilot, and then about 6 years ago became a director, and have been directing ever since.
Have you been with the series since the Raymond Burr? Yeah, I know Raymond Burr did it the first season.
Raymond Burr was our first host, and I was the cameraman, and I I believe I photographed all of the segments as well as the Raymond Burr host segments.
Right. Okay, so we're in Baltimore now. When does this air? What is the air date for this?
The air date will be sometime in September, which is a very short turnaround. Normally we will film something and it'll be 6 weeks to 2 months later before we air it. But because it's such a current and hot story, we want to get it on the air as quick as we can.
What makes it current now, 22 years later? This happened in 1953. Why is it current now in 1994?
Well, what happened in June of 1994 was that they disinterred Frank Olson's body to move him next to his wife in the gravesite. And the sons of Frank Olson decided, well, while we have his body out anyway, this would be the opportunity to do forensic testing, look for any other evidence of foul play in this case.
What was found?
So far, not very much. I mean, they're just getting started now with the testings. They'll probably have some kind of report in October. The only thing we know so far is it was a surprising find that there was no cuts or lacerations on the body. Considering he went through a window, you would expect some cuts, but there weren't any, according to the forensics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I hear LSD is involved in this, perhaps. So what is the follow-up going to be now? Okay, so October they're going to be doing, you said, the testing, and they'll have the reports back. What will be the follow-up on this as we move into the room? What is likely to be the follow-up, depending on, give us a couple of scenarios.
Well, what will happen now is the forensic guys will do their testings. They have toxicology reports to do. They have a bunch of different tests, and that hopefully will get some kind of summation on that in October. Right. And then depending on what they find, if they don't find anything, it may be this investigation doesn't really go much further than that. If they find things that they believe are suspicious in the situation, then there might be a district attorney out of New York may decide to reopen the case. There's at least one, if not more, congressman who's interested in the case and maybe doing some congressional hearings or investigations on it. I think it depends on the forensics and what other evidence we could find.
Okay, from the series point of view, what do you do? What is your follow-up going to be like, again, on both scenarios?
Well, for the show, what we'll do is wait to see what the forensics say, and then we'll do our own what they call updates. And we'll re-interview people. If there's a commission of new evidence comes out, we'll obviously follow up as the season goes. We're also looking for some people who were around at the time, the New York police officers, the hotel operator, the doorman, any other kind of witnesses who may have seen something at the time back in '53, and they may have information that takes the investigation. Obviously, we'll follow up on that as well.
You're an investigator, I guess. You, in effect, you're the director, you're with the series, but you're also a detective. You're personally involved in how many cases have you covered since you became a director?
As a director, I must have now done 70 or 80 stories, most of them of the somewhat investigative quality, nothing quite as intriguing as this, I think. Some of them you solve. You solve a lot of cases where lovers, loved ones are missing, whether it's families that are adopted and separated at birth or something. We've done a lot of those kinds of stories and been able to solve those. These kinds of stories are obviously much more difficult to solve.
How much of the dialogue, do you assume a lot of dialogue, or is it a lot of it coming out? Because when you have people that are no longer around, you're creating dialogue. How far can you go in recreating that dialogue without really tainting the piece?
Yeah, we have to be very careful. I think nobody's going to complain if the dialogue isn't exact, since we don't have transcripts. But we can't allow the scenes to push reality one way or the other. We try to stick to what we know is fact, or at least pretty good opinion of what happened. And we try to stay within that confines. We try not to slant it one way or the other.
Right. Do you have a gut feeling about this case? I mean, you've been researching and looking it over and looking at transcripts. And what's your gut feeling? How is this one going to work out?
It's a very tricky story, and I think it depends on who you spoke to last in terms of the way that you feel. When it comes to things like the CIA, you immediately start thinking, top secrets, and these guys are a bunch of nasty spies. But in fact, I'm not sure that's the case here, or in general, but certainly not the case here. These were scientists. These weren't spies. But when you talk with the family, you talk with the forensic guys, you say, gee, maybe something else was involved, and maybe it is like the novels. Right. My gut sense is I haven't a clue. We're just really going to have to wait and see, and hopefully we'll come up with something more than just the question.
The 60 or 70 stories that you've done, I'm sure you have a lot of favorites. Give me your favorite.
I don't know if I have a favorite, because they're all different. We've done a lot of UFO stories, which I find really intriguing, because the people are very legitimate, real. They're not crazies, you know. And they saw something, and then I always wonder what it is that they saw. Mm-hmm. We did Roswell, for example. I was a cameraman on Roswell. That was
great piece.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's a wonderful story. Mm-hmm. And I've done a lot of stories, what we call lost love stories, where it's not as intriguing, but you just really like the people and you want to help them, and then when you find their relatives and we've made them happy, it's a wonderful feeling.
Just another personal aside, my daughter is 26 now. I hadn't seen her in 22 years. We just came together a year ago. It's a long story. But I especially get into the unsolved mysteries, children that are brought together with their families again, and it always brings a tear to my eye. And now that we're together, of course, I see those segments from a different point of view, feeling very fortunate and feeling very happy for others. Bob Wise, is that right? Mm-hmm. I thank you very much, a former cameraman, now director, and you're doing a heck of a job. And it'll be interesting to see how this case works out. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you. It's great.
Okay, all the actors are assembled in the doctor's office on the set. We're about to shoot the final take on this scene. The sound you hear in the background, by the way, is either the refrigerator right behind me or the air conditioner, which is making this sound. So, folks, there's not much we can do about this sound. But here, without further ado, is the final take of this scene.
Turn the air conditioning off behind you at the bottom switch, the top switch, whatever it says off. Off.
Scene 11, take 90, 90 marker.
Ready, set, and action.
Well, Frank, how are we feeling today?
I feel lousy, Doctor.
Well, you had told me the last time we talked that your heart had been racing, and
yes, that's correct. My heart's been
continuing
racing.
now.
It's been continuing for about a week
Look
now.
at me, please. You were saying that you weren't resting very well. Is that improving?
No, I'm not resting. I haven't been able to sleep for over a week.
I can verify that, Harold. The Colonel and I have been with him for the last 3 days.
I have not been able to sleep for over a week, Doctor, and I think it's because they're giving me something to prevent me from sleeping. I don't know.
Frank, why don't you sit down?
I don't want to sit down. I can't sit down. I can't stop. My heart won't stop racing. I'm not able to sleep. I haven't been able to perform my functions at work. I'm not.
Colonel, tell me.
My work has gone to hell.
Really, Colonel? What is the story?
No, there's nothing wrong with this work.
Oh, Vince, come on. Tell the man I haven't been performing my duties the way I used to.
Your duties have been fine. You've done a fine job the entire week.
Frank,
We've been through this for 2 days.
What are your family relationships like, Frank? Are you getting on with your wife well?
His family's fine,
Doctor, I'm being followed. I come out of my house in the morning, I'm being followed. I'm on my way to work, I'm being followed. I come out of the office in the afternoon, in the evening, I'm being followed. I don't know, I'm sure I'm going to be arrested any minute.
What do they look like,
Not to
Frank?
be arrested. We just relax.
Gentlemen,
I relax.
Gentlemen, I think that perhaps we'd better consider something we talked about a couple days ago, and that is some additional professional help.
There is a Chestnut Lodge. It's near Rockville, Frank.
I'll go to Rockville, I'll go anywhere you want me to go, Vince. I'll go anywhere you people want me to go, as long as you can give me some type of guarantee that this is going to end.
I guarantee it, Frank. I guarantee it.
I want my life back.
There are
Fine,
some
Frank.
good
Please sit.
people there. There are people.
I think we'd better make a couple of phone calls.
Nice. That was great. How'd you do, boss? I felt pretty good.
Okay, the scene has been shot, as far as I know right now. That was the final work on this scene. Let's move along to the doctor for one moment. Doctor, and your real name is?
John Badilla.
And what is your character's name?
Harold Abramson.
Harold Abramson. Who gets to say, go to Chestnut Lodge? I mean, sometimes you were doing it, sometimes the CIA was doing it.
Because it's improvised to a great degree. Sometimes I have the idea, sometimes the agent has the idea. It depends how the conversation is moving. So that's the challenge, of course, is to... it's not going to be word perfect every time.
Right. Do you find yourself stopping mentally and going, oh, God, I shouldn't have done that. How do I get back on cue? How do I get back on mark? Or do you just sort of move along? Because the dialogue did change from time to time. Does that concern you? Do you feel like... I didn't hear you say, hold it, stop.
Well, the challenge is that the dialogue isn't set in stone. And you've got a number of things to juggle. And even if you have a script, an actor has a lot to juggle, a lot to think of all at the same time. and your character, and the blocking, and where the camera is, and keep the lights in mind, and where your fellow players are. And when you're improvising, you've got a whole other thing going on another level. You want to keep the scene in order in your head and keep your character in the scene, and it's a real reach sometimes,
Right.
And that's why we do it more than once.
Okay, as I mentioned to Bob Kelly, I thought he looked very CIA. You're a doctor type. I mean,
Did I look like a doctor?
Did they say? Did they call your agent, say, "Okay, we need a doctor type. Who do we have?" And you showed up. I mean, you definitely are a doctor type. You had a little problem with the eye.
They wanted a good actor first. That's why they got him.
Okay, so but are you but you do kind of look like a doctor.
Actually, I do have a degree in medicine.
You really do.
No, not at all. Fooled you, didn't I? That little acting for you there.
Okay, but you did. What was the problem you were having with the eye? What is that for eye examinations?
That was an instrument that we were going to use to look into Frank's eyes, but it took a little too much time in the scene to go through the pantomime of using the instrument. So we decided just to dispense with it, and just have me look into his eyes, looking for enlarged, dilated pupils and so forth.
Are you happy with the way it turned out today?
I think it's a great scene, and I think it was a pleasure to work with professionals.
It's a little unusual seeing you in jeans, and you've been walking around like a doctor all day. This has been a long day for you, and it turned out pretty well. Where do you go from here? What's your next gig?
Actually, I have a gig in about 30 minutes doing a voiceover for a political candidate who I shall not mention, for a client I shall not mention, but the work goes on.
Okay. I'll be looking forward to seeing you, Doctor. And your name again is?
John Badilla.
And it's Dr. Abramson?
Dr. Abramson. Howard, yes.
Howie. Thank you very much, Dr. John. Our final actor in the piece, in the doctor's office, is Marty McDonough. And your character's name is?
Robert V. Lashbrook.
And you're a CIA officer or operative?
Well, not necessarily an operative. I'm more a chemist. I know drugs.
Right. You have a great voice. You do a lot of voiceovers?
As many as I can get.
Yeah. What have we heard you in?
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Probably nothing recently. I just cut one for the Baltimore Center for the Performing Arts recently, yesterday, day before yesterday.
You're a Baltimorean?
I'm a Baltimorean.
Yeah. Is that Baltimoreans or Baltimoreans?
Baltimoreans is what we call ourselves. But I've lived here 40 years.
Yeah. You're a native. Oh, no, you're not a native. Well, are you a native?
I am a native. My family's been here for a long time.
You have a rather unusual visual impairment. Describe it.
I'm not sure. The doctor at Hopkins told me that he couldn't tell me what the name of it was because I wouldn't remember it. I insisted. He told me. I immediately forgot. It was initially diagnosed as histoplasmosis. It involves scarring of the retina, and periodically it leaks, and I lose more vision. And I've been losing it for about 18 years now. I used to be a lawyer, and I quit practicing law because there was too much reading.
There was nothing you could do about that? That canceled that out? Oh, you're not a practicer. You're still a member of the bar?
I'm still a member of the bar. I've got a brief I've got to write next week for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, but I do less and less because my vision has gotten considerably worse in the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, now you wear glasses, and we were just in that scene at the psychiatrist's office, and now you're doing this scene in the bedroom the hotel, the hotel room, and it's getting dark here, and the light and the dark, and you're across the room. Sometimes you're close up, sometimes you're far away. What does that do for you? Now, you were wearing glasses in the doctor's office scene. How do you deal with that?
I wear contacts, and the glasses that they've given me for the scene are very weak, so I'm able to see pretty well through them. A little distorted, but what I can see, I can see. Right. My own glasses probably would have worked just as well, but they weren't, period.
Right. Okay, you constantly on that medication. I hate to move away from the acting, but this is, I thought this would be important for our listeners to hear.
Well, there's no medication, and they tell me that I've already lost some central vision in the right eye, and they tell me I'm going to lose the central vision in my left eye, and I will definitely have tunnel vision in the right eye and possibly the left eye. There's nothing they can do. They can shoot laser surgery at it, but that's not cool if they're aiming for the central vision.
Okay, let's move on to your profession. I'm going to be leaving now to head back to Jessup. I'm in the boondocks someplace I have to get. Do you know Jessup?
I know Jessup only too well. I visited Jessup to visit clients when I practiced law.
That I understand. Just about every prison in Maryland is right in my neighborhood.
I'm afraid you're probably just about right. Got Crownsville, Jessup.
Really?
I can't think of the other ones.
And there's a tomato company also, a tomato, or whatever, the Great Tomatoes, Fabulous Maryland Tomatoes.
It's the Maryland Fresh Tomato Company. In fact, I represented the architect that they sued when the building didn't go up.
Right. Okay, talk briefly about the scene, because I'm going to be leaving now. Is this the scene where Mr. Olson takes a header out the window? And you're in the scene with him, so how is that set up?
He's in bed next to the window. He's making a phone call to his wife. I'm sitting in the window having a cigarette, unfiltered, of course, since it's 1953. I then look back at him as he finishes the call. He says he's going to turn off the television. I suggest we go to bed. I turn out the light, wish him good night, and that scene ends. The next scene that will be shot, his bed will be empty. The window will be replaced with a broken window, and I'll wake up and run to the window and look out the window.
Is your character today in real life a suspect?
I don't know whether I wouldn't call him a suspect. I think that's having been a lawyer, I think that would be a nasty thing to say.
Alleged.
I don't even think alleged. I think it's the sort of thing that you have to do a lot more reading and a lot more research to make an opinion on, and I'm not a judge. I'm just an actor now.
As an attorney looking at this subject in this case, what are your feelings about it? I don't know if you've had time to research this, how much lead time you've had, but what does it seem to be to you on the surface?
You're not going to get an answer out of me, I'm afraid. I researched this, reviewed it as an actor. I'm playing this character. I'm playing him as the director, I think, wants me to play him, and that's my job. It's a person who's in this situation, and a guy throws himself out the window, and I'm with him, and I'm responsible for him, and it's pretty shocking that the government was involved in one of the things that has intrigued me is how the government has been involved in the drug experiments from 1953 to 1964. The Rockefeller Commission report was fabulous report on that. If anybody wants to get a hold of it, I'm sure it's out in Braille. There's also a hearing in 1977 with Senator Inouye and Senator Kennedy that's very, very informative.
Right. Okay, I'm going to move along and try to get home. Now, we're at Charles Street at Chase in Baltimore. How do I get to Jessup from here?
That's a piece of cake.
Really? Okay.
What you do is how do you get to Jessup?
Now I'm going by bus now, so.
In that case, it's not a piece of cake.
I walked in to speak to you. You were sitting in the window, at the window, and I walked in to speak to you, and I realized I was told, "Sir, you're in the middle of a rehearsal. It looked like the Frank Olson character was just calling home, and you were just hanging out." And here I was in the middle of the rehearsal. Marty McDonough.
Absolutely.
Marty McDonough. I think you look an awful lot like Chris Schenkel. You've got a Chris Schenkel look.
I'll take the Chris Schenkel job anytime.
You've got a great voice, and I wish you luck in the future in legal or acting, however you're going to go.
Better be acting. I'm not going back to law.
I thank you very much for giving me this time. I'm sorry I took you away from the rehearsal, but I guess you're free to go now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I really like this service. I'm glad you're doing it. It's wonderful.
I thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we're upstairs now in Suite 1005 once again, and what was the doctor's office yesterday, Saturday, is today a home scene, a home set, and sitting in the chair waiting to be interviewed is Dr. Frank Olson's son, Eric. We cannot tape this interview. I can't get any of this interview, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to get Mr. Olson after the interview to do a piece with us. So let's shut tape now and wait until after the interview and try to get Mr. Olson then. Let's shut tape now. You're listening to Visions, a series of visits to almost everywhere. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Herb Malsman, and we are in a setup room between the two sets. Eric Olson, Dr. Eric Olson, has just come out of his interview. Good afternoon, good evening, Dr. Olson. What I want to talk about is you. 1953, your father died. He was either pushed or fell or jumped out of a window in New York City, the Statler Hotel. You were 9 years old at the time. 22 years later, this story comes out in the newspaper. What were your emotions over that 22 years feeling that your father had committed suicide?
I never actually felt that he'd committed suicide. I mean, my mother always explained that she didn't think he'd committed suicide. She thought that he had some kind of unfortunate accident in which he had gotten disoriented sort of geographically, woke up in the night after a bad dream and started running and accidentally hit the window and sort of fell out. And I thought that, yeah, that was probably part of what happened, but there was probably more to the story than that.
So the story came out in the newspaper in 1975, an unnamed scientist, the LSD experiments, and then you discovered it was your father. Emotionally speaking, at that point, where did you stand?
Well, I went through a series of emotions. At first, there was relief and some kind of jubilation that at last something had emerged that spoke to this incredible mystery. But that feeling didn't last, because eventually over the next weeks we received documents from the CIA which purported to explain what had happened in New York. But in fact they didn't. They actually deepened the mystery, and there were a lot of conundrums and puzzles in the documents which made me think that, well, now we know something. We know that LSD was involved, but we definitely don't have the whole story here.
Have you taken up psychology as a way to work on this? I mean, what was the basis for you getting into that profession?
I came into it through a variety of pathways. It wasn't one direct door that I took, which was labeled my father's death. I had, in fact, been teaching for many years before that, and I was interested in a lot of issues involving pedagogy and so on. But yeah, there was a major impetus for me that came from the unresolved nature of my father's death. In other words, what could be happening in somebody's mind that might make him jump out of a window? And on the other hand, what happens to a 9-year-old when they're faced with a cognitive puzzle of this magnitude that more or less stops all kind of thinking and feeling in the face of something that you can't understand.
I'm looking at some photographs. Bob Wise was selecting some photographs for the segment on Unsolved Mysteries, and there was a shot that your mother had taken of you and your dad, and your father was looking through a mirror, into a mirror, and you're sort of facing the camera. It looks like your father's a rather decent man, a friendly type. What do you remember about your father? He looked very fatherly there, very sensitive.
Yeah. Well, that's my impression, that he was a very sensitive man. He was a very loving father, and what I feel when I look at that picture is, yeah, we were very close, and that it was a tremendous rupture when he didn't so much die as disappear. I mean, you have to really be clear that from the standpoint of a 9-year-old, there was really no way of understanding this, and I never saw his body when he died, and people were very inhibited about speaking about this because it was such a weird thing, and it scared people, so that it was very difficult to kind of talk about this with friends or with other people around.
So now your life changed in 1975. All of a sudden this is coming out. You became, I guess, it's time to go out and, to discover the truth. How has your life changed since 1975?
Well, I've done a lot of things to try to resolve this. I mean, not continuously, but it's sort of on a cyclical basis. Every few years it sort of wells up and I get some new idea about something we should do or I should do, something I should read, somebody I should talk to, some place I should go. The latest example of this is the idea that we should exhume my father's body and have forensic science come to the aid of this mystery.
Your mother passed away last year, and your father is being moved to be next to your mom, and now it's occurred to the family to do an autopsy. Is that something you were pursuing, or just is this since your mother passed away?
We decided after my mother died that we would do this forensic investigation. We had already decided before she died that when she died we would move my father's body so he could join her and my sister who died in 1978. But when my father was out of the ground, it seemed like a convenient moment to have some tests done to see if we could learn anything more.
Can the truth ever be known? Because when you hear CIA, you think covert and clandestine. Can the truth ever be known in this case?
That's a very good question. I don't know how far we can get. I mean, we've gotten a little farther than we were, a couple of months ago. And in a case like this, it's so damn mysterious and so impenetrable that you're thankful for any tiny increment of insight that you get. And we've gotten some new insights.
Are you very much your father's son? Are you like your father?
It's hard for me to know because he died when I was so young, and the shock of his death obliterated so much memory for me. I mean, it was an incredibly big rupture in my life. I would like to feel that I'm his son in the sense of, being a loving person and someone who is concerned about others and so on.